Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy IV. In the last part, we did the little side area. We did the Cave of Trials, I believe the name was, in order to get everyone up to some new equipment. And now it's time for us to enter the final dungeon. I'm actually doing this place in 2 sessions though. For this part, we're going in with this party because I just want to do something a bit different than the usual 5 people at endgame that you would usually have in 4. When we get to the actual finale, next part though, we are going in with the main 5. And that's what my inventory is looking like. I'm bringing along some extra equipment just to take advantage of some enemy types, like I think the Artemis arrows were in there and such, and lightning claws, I think, were there.
Plot.
Yeah, this is basically the last plot of the game.
Do you have to talk to all the crystals in order to gain access to the inside of the moon?
No, you can just straight up step on that panel and you're good. I'm just doing this for the sake of story stuff. Because this is really the last plot dump the game has, and it's like giving us our last mission.
You are the chosen. Just go.
I think the only time you're required to investigate crystals is in those very specific areas you need to grab them, like the Lodestone Cavern and Sealed Cave. Ah, my eyes.
Seizure warning.
Alright. I love the musical timing here, by the way. Because the Lunar Subterrane is our final dungeon, and for it, at least for the first 3/4 of it, roughly, it plays the Red Wings theme as its song, and I love it. Though hearing the opening 5 notes all the time can get a bit annoying.
I've noticed that there's actually a lot of games that do, there's tons of games that do that, where the song just loops itself after an interruption like a random encounter.
It's mostly partially programming stuff, partially choice stuff, because there are games that when you get into a random encounter, the music doesn't automatically start back over again. It will continue from where it left off. I think the Tales of games do that, if I'm recalling correctly.
The Pokemon games do. The Pokemon games do that.
Past a certain point, at least, yeah. And then we got the Black Garb, I believe, which is a good thing for Edge. However, he's not in the party at the moment. In terms of what that does for him, let me get the stats up because I actually have a lot of equipment pages open for the sake of talking about it. Final Fantasy IV, Black Garb, +3 agility, 24 defense, 15 magic defense, 60 evasion, 8 magic evasion. That's pretty good. You'll also see me casting Warp a few times throughout this dungeon because there are like 3 pathways that diverge from the first room. And you want to go through all of them in order to get all the equipment. There's also quite a few monster boxes in here, forewarning.
Oof, and a lot of them contain behemoths, and that's not fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful enemies. Though, admittedly, in terms of enemy variety, until the second half of this area, there's not much new. This area shares a lot of the early floors of this place, share a lot of enemies with the Lair of the Father. So, Moon Maidens, Armored Constructs, all that. You're going to be fighting them all.
So I guess that's some good practice for the lunar subterrane if you want to train a little bit. Which, why would you be grinding in this game? You don't need to, really.
Yeah. We also got the Sage's Staff a moment ago, which casts life when used as an item and provides 15 to Spirit. It's really good to have on Rosa during boss fights. And speaking of which, similarly to the Cave of Trials, there are weapons hidden throughout this area like this that are guarded by boss fights, such as the White Dragon. The White Dragon has 32,700 HP, 55,000 XP, and its main abilities is to cast Earthquake, Maelstrom, and Slow on you. Earthquake in particular is why I casted Flow to my entire party before this battle started. Maelstrom can still take you down to critical, but you should be able to get its HP down quickly enough if you can avoid the Quake. My base strategy for this is to Berserk, Ed, and I almost said Edge. That's right, there's 2 Ed game names in this in there. Ed and Yang just to get the most damage, because remember, Edge has that Apollo's Harp, dealing 4 times damage plus Fire Elemental to this thing, so that's a decent chunk.
Wow, he's strong for once.
And more or less, I actually have everyone else heal up because he counterattacks with Slow. Thus, to avoid having as many slows thrown at me as possible, I want to use as little attacks on him as possible. Flare, if you have it, can be good. I think that's actually a spell Porum never gets. I think that might be... Oh, no, actually, no, there it is right there. Is really good just due to the fact that it's non-elemental, if I recall. Rydia, if you have her. Bahamut is good, but as you can see, not a very bad boss
not
fight.
a hard boss. Not a hard. I think it's probably the easiest of the ones that guard a piece of equipment.
Yeah, including the Cave of Trial stuff. I completely agree there.
And I would like to say that I wish there were armors guarded by enemies as well, like the ultimate, like the ultimate protection along with the ultimate offense.
Yeah, because even 3 did that to an extent, as did some of the later games. But we got the Murasame for doing that. That's one of Edge's 2 ultimate weapons, because as you might remember, he can dual wield, and thus he's getting 2 katanas in this place. 40 strength and +5 to stamina, strength, and intelligence. And I believe right there we got the Flame Whip. I don't like the Flame Whip. I'll get why in a moment, because I'm having trouble finding that tab.
I know it
if I recall,
it just like decreases intelligence, I think.
Yeah, I think it decreases your intelligence, which is why it's not too useful. It's fire elemental, and it could potentially paralyze, which all Rydia's whips can do, but I don't find that effect too useful. We also start finding the dragon set of equipment in here, which you're supposed to put on Kain, but I could do it with other things.
It's surprising that it's not Dragoon exclusive, though.
Yeah. The notable thing about it is that, yeah, it's a better defense upgrade at the moment, but it's also resistant against fire, ice, and lightning. So if for some reason you still have the fire and ice equipment on, you can completely get rid of that.
Like, completely? Like, they do 0?
No, it resist just means basically, I think you take half damage.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you probably would have said immune to if...
Notable, though. It's also resistant against dragon elemental damage, and Sid can equip it if you brought him in for some reason.
Dragon elemental damage? I've never heard of that before.
Well, more or less, it means it'll reduce damage from dragon-type enemies, like their physical attacks.
Okay, here we have a little murder. This thing has 12,000 HP and 21,000 XP. It's weak to lightning, and it'll basically cast Scan on itself a million times. If you cast Thunder on it, it'll be like, haha, I tricked you, and then it will kill you.
Yeah, I think it casts Thundaga 3 times? Or something like that. That's actually why I believe, if I'm recalling my setup correctly, when I showed it off at the start, everyone has diamond armlets on, or as many as I can get at least. That's to resist this guy in the case I did it accidentally. Though, I admit, I fell for that when I first played the game. And we're immediately led into our next battle against a gold dragon. I believe this is actually the last of the dragon-type enemies. 82,000, no. 8,200 HP, 30,000 experience points, 23,000 gil. Can drop silver apples or lightning storms, I believe. But its big things that it can either entangle you or use lightning. Entangle, I think, if I'm recalling correctly, at least paralyzes. They're also fairly susceptible to sleep, I believe.
Gold dragon drops silver apples. I'm disappointed.
Actually, I need to check if the silver dragon drop gold apples. No, it doesn't. Damn it. Joke potential.
Behemoth. Behemoth,
there's a couple
part
of
1. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Too many.
As you can see, I have Edward hiding because in the case he physically attacked, the counter might actually take him out. Cecil and Yang are going to be taking him out on the behemoths here, really. And there we get the Stardust Rod, which is the thing I really prefer for Rydia. It gives 45 attack, which is pretty useless on a mage, I know, but it also grants the wielder 15 intelligence, which is the reason you want to give it to her. Oh, I'm healing up. That must mean this is another monster in a box. In this area, no surprise.
Of course, and it has 2 new enemies. It has a red dragon and its cousin, the blue dragon, which Kyle will go over soon. The red dragon has 15,000 HP, 41,500 experience points. It's weak to ice, and it absorbs fire, of course. It's immune to every possible status effect, and it drops red fangs, dragon gloves, a dragon lance, or wyvern lance as it's called in this version, and a crystal ring. I've never gotten the lance or the ring before.
I've gotten the lance. I've never gotten the ring. And its cousin, the blue dragon, is more or less the same. 15,000 HP, 36,000 XP, 40,200 gil. Can drop the wyvern lance, dragon whisker, blah, blah, blah. Not too dangerous, though I believe they have the highest individual monster experience yield in the game. At least the red dragons do. I know later on in this dungeon, there's an encounter you run into 4 of them at once, but due to sprite size limitations, they actually stack them all on top of each other.
There's
but the crystal...
I don't know of another game that does that, but keep going.
I know one. It's the Vector dragon things in Kefka's Castle in 6. The little lizard dudes. Vector Stearns, that's what it was. The Crystal Ring apparently is a fairly useful one. It increases your agility by 5 and resists sleep, paralyze, and confusion.
Ooh, that sounds actually kind of good. Okay, this is an Ariman, also known as It's called Alamanya in the SNES port for J2E translation. It's got 25,000 HP, 25,000 HP and 40,000 experience points. No, it's weak to throwing weapons probably because it's a flyer. It drops eye drops, elixirs, hourglasses, gold hourglasses, and protect rings.
We'll go over Protect Rings in a while, because there's actually a fixed one you can get in this dungeon. I think this is also the first monster, as you can see over Rose's head there, that can inflict you with the Doom status ailment. Essentially, when that countdown reaches 0, they're dead. It's also, I think, the first appearance of it in the series, if I'm recalling correctly.
Of the Doom effect?
Yeah, I believe it is.
I think it just has to do with the active time battle system, because the only way I could see that working in 1, 2, or 3 is just like how many turns have passed.
Turn numbers, yeah. And I can confirm this is its first appearance. There's only 2 enemies in the base game that can use it on you, though. And that was one of them, and the other one's also in this area. Monster in a box!
Oh no!
More red dragons.
Is this the one where you get 4 of them?
No, this is only 2. The 4 of them is in the very last floors. More on that later.
Also, wow, that damage output.
Yeah. I actually, I've done what I consider a challenge run before in this game without doing like actual challenge run stuff, where essentially the only person from the main cast I bring into this final area is Cecil. And to some extent, you might need to do that to access post-game stuff, but more on that later.
A challenge run?
Yeah. More on that during the credits because of how the post-game works.
Another monster in a box.
Dino Zombie! Dino Zombies have 12,000 HP, 15,000 XP, 8,100 gil. They are weak to fire, which is why they died really quickly. But they're actually very simple monsters because they're pretty weak for this point. They can drop the Cursed Ring, I guess, which I guess could be useful. But their only ability themselves is to curse you, which I think reduces your attack in 4. Did we just get our first piece of crystal mail there? I believe we did. That is another thing this dungeon has. It has a second set of equipment that you're technically supposed to give to Cecil, and it's...
Oh, this room!
I'll let you talk about this room.
Okay, so... this place has a 1 in 64 encounter, which will soon be found, because the siren calls the rarest possible encounter in that room. And that is 5 Flan Princesses. I hate these enemies. These guys have 20,000 HP and 10,000 experience points. They don't have any elemental weaknesses, and they're immune to every possible status effect. They drop Dry Ethers, elixirs, Fumastrukens, and if you're really, really lucky, you'll get a pink tail.
And if I recall, that is a 1 in 64 drop for the pink tail.
164 drop for the pink tail, so it's basically 1 over 64 squared. That you are
4096.
4096 of you getting a pink tail without use of a siren.
Yeah. And as for the crystal mail we got earlier, the crystal line of equipment can only be equipped by Cecil, sadly, but it resists basically everything. Darkness, Silence, Mini, Toad, Pig, Berserk, Undead. I'm not sure if having the Avenger Sword would actually surpass that Berserk immunity, though. It also raises your spirit by 3. Not that you're using your spirit too often with Cecil, because he's not using much magic. For the most part, that only really comes into play with a certain weapon we can get in the post-game area.
Also, something I really respect about the PSP version is that it tells you who the Flan Princesses are berserking. Because in the Super Nintendo version, they don't do that, so you have to figure it out by yourself. And also, in order to remove Berserk, you have to use Dispel. I don't think it can be removed with Asuna.
Yeah.
Which is really annoying.
If I recall, I actually did some grinding there, because I think you may have seen my money jump up a good bit. I did not get a pink tail from doing that grinding if I did any there. However, I did do some extra grinding between parts, and I may have gotten more lucky. Wink.
He probably still didn't get one. It's fine. What were they thinking when they made the drop ratios? Why did they do this?
Also, as you can see, I'm getting a bit low on inventory space, so I'm actually starting to throw away some of the equipment I don't need anymore.
I love how
That's
they
obvious.
mostly fixed inventory problems in later games, especially in 9. You've got like infinite space.
I think 5 was the first one to have a really expanded inventory. Because I don't remember having many inventory problems with 5 or 6 for that matter.
Final Fantasy IV is really the only one where I've had inventory problems in the past.
Yeah, especially in other versions where it's lower than the amount we have here. And this behemoth box is rather interesting because if I recall, this is where we're going to end up getting a protect ring. I just want to confirm something really quickly.
I think it is.
Let's see.
Well, we're about to find out. Yes,
Yep.
protect ring.
Well, first off, I should mention, I was a bit off on the crystal stuff earlier. Technically, every piece of every armor set has a different resistance. Like the crystal shield will resist undead attacks. Either way, the protect ring is really, really good. It always has been, really. It resists fire, ice, and lightning. However, it also provides 10 defense, 12 evasion, 5 magic defense, and 10 magic evasion. However, it also fixes something, but it's only in the Super Nintendo version. You might remember when we had like the fire ice equipment, it made you weak to that element. To the opposite element, like fire shield made you weak to ice. Having the protect ring, I believe, changed that so that you just resist it.
Good.
I think. I'm not entirely certain of that. Either way, we have our next boss fight here against Dark Bahamut, who starts off with the exact same shit. But he gets it right out there, so the only thing you can really do is, if you have Headward, have him hide. Dark Bahamut has 60,000 HP, 64,000 XP, and just loves to use Mega Flare, Reflect, and Flare. So he's actually quite a bit more aggressive than his cousin was a part or two ago. Strategy I use for this fight is to actually use Flare right back at him. Focus with Yang, have Ed return, and then just start attacking because of the dragon through the Apollo's Harp. Palom should Flare, because obviously I don't have Rydia, so I can't use Bahamut on him. Even though I think there's a counterattack to that from my memory. Berserk Ed just to get the most out of your damage, because look at that.
I've never am going to see him deal max 9s ever again.
And Rosa, or whatever white mage you have, really should focus on healing. Spider Silks are still really good just to slow him down for the occasional second Mega Flare. When Bahamut eventually does use Reflect, have Palom use Meteor instead.
I remember this guy being way harder in the Super Nintendo version.
Not really. It's more so due to the fact that, if I recall, the Super Nintendo version was made easier in some ways by removing some items and elements. Like, I think some spells were removed even. But they also got rid of some useful strategies by doing that exact same stuff.
Really interesting.
I'm not sure exactly what was removed or not off the top of my head, because that list is way too long to even listen to Kyle out. I am saving future me from that. Oh, you're welcome. But for doing that, we do get the Ragnarok, which in the original Final Fantasy IV is Cecil's best weapon. Post-game for this in GBA adds 2 more that are better than it. But as for what it has here, it has...
190?
Apologize, it's taking a moment to load.
190 attack? Something like that?
200. Also, it increases strength, stamina, and spirit by 15 rather. Extra damage versus undead.
Wowee.
Yeah, that's real good. Oh, another monster in a box. Oh, it's not being sped up. That means this doesn't last long.
I'm sure they get killed very quickly. And maybe you might get the Artemis bow.
It's honestly, I think I'm a bit spoiled at this point by some later Final Fantasies having enemies entirely unique to the final dungeon in entirety. Because, like, Final Fantasy VII had enemies that were only really found in that area. 8, I believe, had that. Heck, 8's final area had a lot of boss fights. 9...
Yeah, 9 had...
9 had a lot of unique enemies.
9 had the Stilva, Behemoth, and the Chimera, and the Ash.
Do we count the crystal apparitions of the
I don't. Not really.
Right.
I don't call the Crystal World not the final area, but an area on its own.
Yeah, I get you. Either way, there's a save point there, and if I recall, that's actually the last one in the game, so make sure you use it if you're down here. But I actually want to change Rosa off of the bow stuff because we're coming up with some more boss fights. Also, we got the Minerva bustier earlier. I know I probably listed the stats in a call-up, but it's actually not too useful for Rosa outside of boss fights. No, outside of random battles, because it raises her attack set, which I don't find using too much.
Okay, the one guarding the Holy Lance is called the Plague Horror. He's got 33,333 HP, 31,108 XP, and he drops potions. He casts Doom on the whole party, and he will haste you to speed up the process.
Yeah, so essentially, he's a non-aggressive fighter. He'd be basically crowd control in some other games like Shin Megami Tensei. Strategy for this is to get slow on him, as well as yourselves, actually, in some cases, because it does slow down the Doom timer. And get as much damage in as possible. Thankfully, he doesn't have that high of an HP count. But you would just want to go all out, Holy, Flare, Focus, whatever you have that can do the most damage possible in as short a time. I think that's my first time using Holy in this game, too. I say that as I probably use it in a battle in between parts. Or not in between parts, during this part that I ended up editing out. Ah, there's that haste, and he can multi-target it. I think that's one of the few times you actually see a multi-targeted haste before Hastega was introduced.
Why was all materia not a thing in this game? That would have been nice to have multi-target on Flare.
What materia had haste in 7? I'm trying to remember.
Time? Is there one that's called Time? I don't even know.
Yeah, there probably is. Well, we got 2 chests here, but we also have to get past another 2 bosses, Lunasaurs, 2 of them. And there's a reason there's 2 of them. They're fairly weak by comparison to the other bosses. 23,000 HP, 29,500 XP. I love to use Reflect, Bio, Bad Breath, Scorch, and Heal. Thankfully, I have ways around the Bad Breath ability due to the fact that I have some stat-resisting equipment on everyone. Reflect is what's the more dangerous thing here. Because they do that, you either, if you want to get magic on them, have to use defense-piercing magic, which costs a lot, or reflect off yourself. Because their only strategy is to reflect stuff off of themselves as well, if I recall. Hence why they just cast a reflect on us. So I guess, yeah, you actually can't reflect any of their stuff back, so...
I for some reason recall these guys being rather difficult, at least for the first time I was playing.
Yeah, that's also the first timer thing, because you don't know what you're doing exactly. The bio spell that they reflect will do around, I think, 2,000 damage, depending, so you want to be careful with that. We don't get anything for beating them individually, but we do get access to these 2 chests, which hold 2 really good items.
Spoilers, they're ribbons.
Yep, they're both ribbons. Ribbons, in the case of Final Fantasy IV, are headgear, which can be equipped by anyone as usual. They resist Poison, Blind, Silence, Pig, Mini, Toad, Petrify, Instant Death, Gradual Petrify, and Curse.
Berserk
as well
also?
as in the PSP version, Confuse, Sleep, and Berserk. Those weren't in the Super Nintendo version. On its own, it also adds 9 defense, 12 magic defense, and 12 evasion.
That would have made my life so much easier if in the Super Nintendo...
They also get added elemental bonuses in the easy type version, like Fire, Ice, and Lightning.
Also, this thing for some reason has the boss theme. This is the Death Mask. 37,000 HP, 50,000 XP, light curtains, X potions, elixirs, and a glass mask. I've never seen that in my life.
It also can do basically the exact same strategy as the Lunasaurs, because it likes to cast Reflect on... I forget if it casts Reflect on you to reflect your healing back, or on itself to reflect spells at you. But it has Bio, Kiraga, Holy, and Flare. That's pretty dangerous. Yeah, it's reflecting off itself. The glass mask, I'll get into that in a moment, but a few moments ago we completely skipped over. We got the Holy Lance for beating Plague Horror. That is Kane's ultimate lance in the versions that are not this. He gets some, obviously, extra ones in the post-game. I believe it does 109 power? Damage versus ghouls, but when you cast it as use it as an item, it casts Holy, which is pretty useful.
Is that only a thing in the later versions?
No, I think that's in all versions where you can actually use this as equipment, that is.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Also, Kenny, it's not just this enemy that actually has the boss music. Once, as you may have noticed, when we got down to this floor, the environment shifted more to the crystal outlook that we saw in the Lunarian areas earlier. Every encounter down here is treated as a boss fight.
Which is weird.
Yeah. Let's see, what is that
Also,
glass mask do?
looking at the concept art for this guy, Kyle and I discovered that he actually has a neck.
Or they imply he has a neck, because below the head, it's like just darkness. The glass mask is 30 defense, minus 10 evasion. I'm not seeing anything special about it. If I find any further information, I'll obviously put a thing up, but yeah, that's weird. And down there is towards where the final area is. By the way, I love the background here.
Yeah, the
and also, they
background's
start playing
really
with the
cool.
giant on these floors, which nice little revisit to the song to make things feel more final. And right over here, we have our final optional boss fight, and potentially the hardest, which is why I'm making sure I have a good look at my equipment. He's potentially the most damaging. I also put myself on weight just to abuse the strategy thing. Our final refight is another recolor of Leviathan known as Ogopogo. That name's a palindrome. Ogopogo starts the fight by using Deluge twice, so make sure you have the HP to survive. 50,000 HP on him, 61,000 XP. Loves to use Deluge, Whirl, and Frost Blast, so potentially damaging stuff. Not even potentially, very damaging stuff. However, in terms of a strategy for it, let me scroll down. Flare, Focus, Berserk, the usual. Spider Silks are useful as usual as well. Because when it comes to the bosses, until the final boss, really, and even then to that boss in some extent, once you reach this final dungeon, similarly to Final Fantasy II, you have somewhat of a set strategy.
Yeah, is
use your most damaging attacks. That's all you really have to do.
just go all out. That's one thing that I don't really like about a lot of games, is that by the time you reach the ending, it's not like kind of keeping you sharp on your mind, I guess. They're not throwing curveballs at you at this point.
Yeah, Final Fantasy V, I think, was the first game to really get that down pat during its main campaign.
Oh my, yeah, with all of like the different with like all the boss fights, you need the right jobs, you need the right skills equipped.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, 5 is really good. It's also extraordinarily fun to break, and I can't wait to do that eventually. But one thing I'll also give this game as post-game is that they shift that up by having each of the bosses have something unique to them, if I recall.
Ooh, post game. I've never heard of that. Well, I've never seen it for Final Fantasy IV. For Final Fantasy IV.
More on that next part. But yeah, as you might notice, I have auto battle active because I set the battle speed to keep, or battle type, because if I just press the select button, I can basically get through the fight just more that quickly. That was grammar. And for doing that, we get Edge's second ultimate weapon, the Masamune, which is 65 attack, 49 accuracy. I think it also might boost some of his agility. Let me confirm that. Yeah, plus 3 agility. Casts haste when used as an item, though, which is pretty good.
I don't know why, but it feels like this Masamune is underwhelming. I guess just a lot of Edge's weapons were not very good, in my opinion.
Edge as a whole is actually probably one of my least favorite party members out of the ones you get to keep because, yeah, his thief abilities are good, as his throw, but his weapons don't really stand out much on their own.
I agree.
Either way, before we end this off, one thing I should mention is that in between parts, I'm actually going back to Mysidia to get the main 5 party members back. At the beginning of next part, when we come back in from the exit of that staircase, I have Cecil, Kane, Rosa, Rydia, and Edge, just for the sake of having the traditional ending.
Alrighty.
And who knows, something bonus might happen along the way. Wink, wink.
Oh boy.
Either way, with that, we're going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 17, we're going to go finish this fight.
And he may have an adamant armor by that point. Wink, nudge.
Who knows? Hey, I didn't cheat. See you guys then.